It is time to flick the green switch. We have a chance not simply to reset the world economy, but to transform it. COVID recovery and our planet's repair must be the two sides of the same coin.
The benefits of a green recovery are beginning to be modeled by countries around the world, but we're still falling short on investment in sustainable change. Investing in jobs and carbon-neutral economies as part of recovery today will create resilience and equality tomorrow, continuing our pursuit of the Sustainable Development Goals. PAGE, the United Nations Partnership for Action on Green Economy, is positioned to help. Since 2012, PAGE has provided the expertise needed to build more sustainable and inclusive economies. As countries around the world have begun planning their COVID-19 recoveries, PAGE has leveraged the UN system and funding from the German government to align recovery with the SDGs.
That is where I see the real value of PAGE. Because PAGE, for quite some time now, 7 years they've said, has been gathering experiences from different countries in different contexts, at different scales, at different levels of development, to develop a sense of what works, how it can be done, concrete policy suggestions based on deep and thoroughly prepared country-specific analysis to foster and promote and enable a green recovery.
To date, 20 partner countries are working with PAGE to green their economies, and many more have expressed interest in PAGE support. In Indonesia, PAGE is collaborating with government leaders to spearhead a circular economy. Through the Build Back Better with Low Carbon Development initiative, Indonesia is laying the groundwork for job creation, skills development, and resource efficiency. South Africa, another PAGE partner, has been experiencing immense job losses throughout the pandemic. Leaders worked with PAGE to rapidly model the impact of the government's recovery plans. This data is helping inform the government's future economic plans and underpins South Africa's current green recovery programming. Increasingly, countries around the world are pursuing green recoveries to support the Sustainable Development Goals for people, economy, and planet. However, many further efforts are needed to ensure a sustainable future. Learn more about green recovery and green inclusive economy at un-page.org.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to see some familiar faces in the audience today.
Good afternoon and good evening. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My voice has gone a baritone lower. It's wonderful to have you here today on behalf of the PAGE Partnership, the PAGE Family, the Partnership for Action on Green Economy. I see so many of our partners here in the audience today. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this event today. It's going to be wonderful. My job here as a member of the PAGE Management Board from UNEP, my name is Stephen Stone, I've been with PAGE for some time now, is really just to welcome you and say a few words about PAGE. Today we're celebrating Stockholm plus 50, a very, very important day, very, very important milestone. PAGE was born 10 years ago at Rio plus 20. And I have a very, very clear memory of being in one of the hangars in Rio when ministers came together from Korea, from Germany, from many, many different places, from Sweden, to say we are going to lift this thing and rise to the challenge of transforming our economies because they are material and the environment is material to human well-being. Ladies and gentlemen, 10 years later, PAGE is now a family of 20 countries, more than 8 funding partners, and a web of knowledge, let's call them knowledge providers, knowledge exchangers that are finding solutions to solve the problems of the world, one country at a time. To kick off the event today, let me hand over to our moderator today. He is Alan Atkinson. He is the Assistant Director General for CEDA and also a very knowledgeable man in terms of the green economy. Alan, over to you to moderate our event today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. I'll use this one. Thanks so much. Welcome, everybody. That might have been false advertising, Stephen. But in any case, I have been working with these issues a long time, like I think many people in this room. And one thing that I think we all know is that we have been talking about them for a long time, and now it's about doing them, and that will be the focus of our time together. Stephen, you were talking about how Stockholm Plus 50 is a good time to look back, and I also want to note that this 50 years, not just since the Stockholm Plus 50 meeting, but also since the publication of a very influential book called The Limits to Growth. I think back then the idea of limits was very controversial. Now we all speak the language of circularity, the planetary boundaries, and the limits of one planet. But more importantly, we need to look forward. That's why we're here today, and I'm very much looking forward to this extraordinary panel. We have a great deal to talk about, and here comes that word again, very limited time. So, Stephen, although I'm very grateful for the invitation to moderate, I'm a little worried that I'll be one of the most unpopular moderators here after this event, because we'll have to be very efficient and get a lot done in a short time. So without further ado, in the interest of time, let me be very quick to welcome up to the podium for some welcoming remarks Mr. Gerd Müller, who is the Director General of UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, one of the co-organizers of this event. Mr. Müller, I understand that you're also, of course, a former federal minister in Germany, where you were instrumental in strengthening Germany's development cooperation budget and mobilizing private investments through new financing models. So please, welcome us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Colleagues, distinguished guests, that's my first meeting with you. It's a great pleasure for me and totally occupied here. Thank you for coming, all. Colleagues from ILO, UNDP, UNITAR, and I would like to thank you as the new Director General of UNIDO for this good cooperation in the last 10 years. So looking forward for a good cooperation the next 10 years in the future. We all know the facts, ladies and gentlemen, and the challenges of our times. But the question is, are we willing, not only the community we meet here, the governments around the world, are we willing to rethink what we do and how we act? What is needed? Needed is a new start and a new energy, a new spirit. Do you feel it here in Stockholm? Naya, let's think about and talk about this. Our spirit must be even stronger. We need more global solidarity today, tomorrow, and for the next 50 years. I tell you, as a former minister, a world without hunger is possible. Stopping climate change is possible. We have the knowledge and we have the technologies for solutions. Only what is missing? Missing is the political will. We miss the political will, and we can see and feel it even here in Stockholm 2022. That is not a good sign, ladies and gentlemen. The SDG agenda, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the Convention on Biological Diversity are the global frameworks to preserve the livelihood of everyone of the planet. And think about 1972, the speech of Indira Gandhi, or 1992 Rio, 2015 New York, the agenda, or Paris, this Paris Agreement. We must send a clear signal to politics, business, and society. The challenges can be solved. We can do it, but we have to act now. And from this conference, ladies and gentlemen, must be this signal. We will do it. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not a question of finance. The money is there. It is a question of political will. This year, armament and military budgets rose to $2 trillion. $2 trillion. $2,000 million. Listen to that number, $2 trillion. This is unbelievable. It is unacceptable. Worldwide spending on international development cooperation fell on the other side to 180 billion. Look at this gap. Also, it is clear to everyone that the corona pandemic, climate change, and the Ukraine war requires more funds and effort, not less. All of these challenges hits the poorest of the poor hardest. So what is needed? Short. First, a serious debt relief for the world's poorest countries. Second, an investment campaign in structural development for agriculture, sustainable energy, and climate protection. Third, we need a fair, the next necessary step. We need a fair world trade system with fair supply chains. The exploitation of people and nature in developing countries must be stopped. Fourth, decarbonization must decouple further growth from emissions. I'm very pleased with the efforts of the Partnership for Action on Green Economy. PAGE helps develop and protect global public goods and helps to foster new ways of creating sustainable economies. PAGE is making South cooperation stronger. As the new Director General of UNIDO, progress by innovation is my working motto. And again, we are the platform for technology and knowledge transfer. We do have the technology and the knowledge. A sustainable approach to business growth and consumption. The global challenges can only be solved in global cooperation with shared global responsibility. Ladies and gentlemen, UNIDO, you all, we stand ready to support the global green economic transformation. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for coming. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Gert. You know, I think all understand the challenges to accelerate the process of growth in the things that we do want, the kinds of transformations that Gert was talking about. And to set that challenge of expanding and accelerating the work towards a green economy, a circular economy, we also have our special guest to provide some framing remarks for us now. Mr. Virginijus Sinkevicius, the Commissioner for Environment, Oceans and Fisheries. We would be very keen to hear your experience, not least of which since you have a background as a minister with a focus on innovation, as I understand. So please, the floor is yours, sir.
Yes. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, and of course, thank you very much for having me. Very clear that in addition to the triple planetary crisis that we are facing, an increasing humanitarian crisis due to COVID-19, escalating wars and widespread insecurity. And raising to these challenges, of course, requires immediate actions at all society, at all levels of the society and, of course, economy. And the European Union wants to lead by example in the battle for a healthy planet. We have the ambition to promote a just transition to a carbon neutral and circular economy in Europe and globally. In doing so, we are clear that the circular economy is a key strategy towards attaining SDG 12 on sustainable consumption and production, which I think does not get actually enough attention on international fora, and I'm very happy to speak here with you today. Circularity also contributes to the resilience of our economies facing an increasing scarcity of some materials and disruption in supply chains. Achieving a circular economy is therefore at the heart of the European Green Deal and a cornerstone of our climate action. With our circular economy action plan, we aim to reduce the use, first of all, consumption footprint, so take a responsibility for our consumption, and to double the circular material use rate in the EU in the coming decade. Focusing on sectors where, of course, circularity potential is the largest. So first of all, batteries and vehicles, textiles, electronics, plastics, buildings, and construction. We aim to make sure that sustainable products become the norm. And we have put forward a sustainable product policy initiative, which is increasing circularity in the way goods and materials are produced, used in our economies, and by promoting products that are more durable, reusable, repairable, recyclable, and energy efficient. Of course, what's very important, all that has to be already addressed in products design stage. So upcoming proposal in the context of the EU Circular Economy Action Plan include legislation to prevent false green claims, the revision of the Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive to transform waste into resources, and a policy framework for bio-based compostable and biodegradable plastics. So we recognize that some of these initiatives will have an impact on our partner countries as well. And this way, and that's why the European Union supports and promotes the circular economy transition in the context of its external action, in a range of cooperation areas such as the environment, private sector development, and sustainable cities. The switch to green is one of the main EU initiatives that are contributing to global action on the circular economy by supporting green businesses development in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The EU strongly supports the Global Alliance on Circular Economy and Resource Efficiency, GACIA, led by UNEP and UNIDO, and we also welcome and have joint regional initiatives promoting in key value chains like African Circular Economy Alliance and the Latin America, the Caribbean, and the Caribbean Circular Economy Coalition. We intend to lead efforts at the international level to reach a global agreement on plastics. It is, in our view, the most effective approach to fight marine litter and make plastics industry more and more circular. Transition to circular business models requires, of course, cooperation with all actors along the global value chains. Building on commitments from large buyers and of course, on support to small operators such as SMEs, which lack resources to adopt improved standards. So the recently launched Switch to Circular Economy Value Chains projects works with the EU multinationals in selected value chains like textiles, plastic packaging, and electronics, and ICT for that purpose. To summarize very shortly, the EU wants to engage with global partners and multilateral initiatives to increase awareness of the relevance and the benefits of the transition, to share our experience, to encourage countries to develop enabling policies and transform their economies, and to facilitate more consistent and coordinated efforts in this direction. PAGE integrated support mechanisms connecting country and global action is also well placed to accelerate global sustainability agendas based on concrete evidence from national transformation efforts and challenges. And what is more, PAGE's engagement with a representative sample of large economies, emerging transition economies, least developed countries, and small island developing states enables the design of comprehensive interventions addressing the challenges that different sets of countries face in advancing the transition. Why I think the circular economy can be a key? First of all, it's very well accepted by society, by businesses everywhere around the world. And it helps to deal with the triple planetary crisis, actually, by changing and moving from the linear to a circular economy. It helps to decrease the pressure on biodiversity because we need less resources. It helps to create local jobs. It helps to involve people in the decision making because the consumers, they get full informed choices on the goods that they purchase. And it, of course, ensures growth. So circular economy is a great answer. And by policies, we can, of course, make it a success story which will be enrolled much quicker. So, just to finish, there is no doubt that we are experiencing a difficult times. And allow me, however, to close with a positive message. Looking at our current financing cycle for the period of 2021 to 2027, we see a lot of interest to address the green and circular economy transition in the future EU-supported initiative. And let me reassure you that we will be engaged with our partners around the world in dialogue and concrete action to advance policies that act to the root causes of the triple crisis. And there is simply no other way forward, and I believe that with that cooperation we will build even stronger ties, and more importantly we'll find solutions to fight the triple crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sinkevičius. You mentioned that these are difficult times, but we should think positively. I was just in Brussels where we heard our colleagues say that the EU is at its best when things are toughest. So I think that those were encouraging words for us in these times. Ladies and gentlemen, we do have, as I mentioned, an extraordinary panel that I'm very much looking forward to introducing you to. To our panelists, we've saved a seat for each of you here on the stage. I'll be calling you up one after the other so that our participants get a chance to understand the global reach and expertise that we have on this panel. So this seat's mine, by the way. So when I call you up, please fill in, starting here and that way. So joining us first, I'm so pleased to welcome the Honorable Cecilia Nicolini, who is the State Secretary of Climate Change, Sustainable Development, and Innovation in the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development for Argentina.
Thank you. It was my seat, right?
Thank you. Cecilia, I understand that you are responsible for the National Climate Change Cabinet, which brings all the areas of national regional government together to plan for a resilient and low emissions economy, and that you somehow combine this with active research at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Harvard University. So I'm curious to know how you do that, but we won't take time to find out just now. Welcome to the panel.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Joining us now, Mr. Byung Brandt Kim, who is the Deputy Minister for Climate Change and Carbon Neutral Policy Office in the Ministry of Environment for the Republic of Korea. Please join us on the panel. And Deputy Minister Kim, I understand you've been playing a leading role in enacting the Carbon Neutrality Act in Korea last year. Just the name of that legislation should give us a sense of hope. Thank you and welcome, sir. Our next panelist is someone I know well, Ms. Karin Jämtin, the Director General of the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, SIDA. Please welcome Karin to the stage. Karin, I know, of course, that you're also, among many other things, a former Minister of Development Cooperation, but I know that recently you've become quite a driving force in advancing the financing for development, sustainable development agenda. And I know that because you're my boss.
And you're my partner, yes.
Welcome to the panel.
Thank you.
And last but absolutely not least, we're welcoming to the panel Ms. Gita Sabarwar, who is the United Nations Resident Coordinator in Thailand. And we are so happy to have you with us on the panel, Gita.
Love you. Thanks.
We were chatting before. I already had a sense of her deep well of experience, 3 decades working across multiple country contexts in Asia, working on peace building, governance, social policy, while generating and applying empirical and I really wanted to get this phrase into the introduction, big data analysis to deal with the emerging developing country issues. So welcome the entire panel, please.
Thanks, Anna. You'll be all right?
Yeah. And I'm going to adopt first names. This is Sweden. We're very informal. I hope you don't mind. Cecilia, the first question comes to you. From Argentina's perspective and experience, what would you say are the key instruments that will ensure the effective inter-ministerial coordination that needs to happen for a just and economic transition? If we're going to do systems transformation, we have to work together. How are you accomplishing that in Argentina?
Thank you very much, Alan, for your question and for the invitation. And as you mentioned, my research on MIT, actually, my last position was at the Center of Collective Intelligence. So I definitely think that in order to address this planetary crisis, we really need to think collectively to find possible solutions. And that is something that we are working a lot, actually, when we think about how we coordinate and organize this. We have to think about, I think, two key things. One is governance, and the other one is finance, right? That they just addressed that maybe then we can talk a little bit about finance. But in terms of governance, and we are working a lot on our National Cabinet of Climate Change, which actually it's a law, it's a climate change law, which is very important because it mandates us and it's binding in order to coordinate with, brings every area and sector of government to work together on designing these policies and working also with the sectors, with the private sector, with civil society and with subnational governments in order to draft our strategy that will make us meet our commitments in a sustainable way. We have this vision, we are from a developing country, we talk from the global south, and we need to think about just transitions. And that means that we need to make a good diagnosis and understand what is the situation. And for that also, what we are doing, and we are working a lot, is to training the people that have to make the decisions in environmental issues. For example, we just passed a law as well, the Yolanda law. Actually, it's Yolanda, or in Argentinian accent, Yolanda, a name after the first woman Secretary of Environment in Latin America in the 70s. And actually, this law, it mandates the training of public officials in environmental issues so they can have the perspective whenever they are addressing the policies, even if they are in the energy ministry or the health ministry or any ministry, or also at the subnational level, to have this perspective. Along with another law also of environmental education that we are implementing throughout the country in order to give to the climate perspective and environmental, since we are studying when we are kids. So I think that is very important for governance.
Thank you so much. That's so much. So much of it is legally established at this point as well. But I am curious, what role has PAGE, the sponsors of this event, played in that? Has that been helpful to you in some way in the process?
Well, we are working in PAGE. Actually, the first step, I think, is to do a good diagnosis. And we are working a lot with PAGE, also with the Ministry of Labor and the Ministry of Industry, in order to analyze all the capabilities that we need to build in order to do this just transition in the different areas so we can meet our commitments.
Thanks very much. We'll come back to you, I promise. But Byeobjong, if I'm saying your name somewhere close to correctly.
Yeah, it's good.
Very glad to have you here. And I've spent some time in your country, so I know how serious your government is about advancing these issues. But what do you think we need to consider if we're going to genuinely and generally accelerate action on the green economy? What do we actually need to do?
Okay, thank you, moderator, for the meaningful question. First of all, thank you for the warm welcome, and it's my honor to be at this high-level event for PAGE. Today, the world is in triple planetary crisis: climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. The interconnectedness of these challenges requires a system-wide solution that is low carbon, resource efficient, and socially inclusive. In fact, this is what green economy is by definition: being innovative and doing more with less. Green economy is especially relevant now, as we have only limited time to achieve SDGs in time. I believe there are 3 important elements that should be considered for our transition to a green economy. First, we should establish a comprehensive national strategy that covers the entire economy and society. The Carbon Neutrality Act enacted last year lays the legal foundation for the implementation of such a comprehensive strategy. developed to achieve Korea's vision of becoming carbon neutral by 2050. The Act lays the groundwork for a system-wide transformation from industry and transport to waste management. And the scope of the Act goes beyond the conventional boundaries. The law addresses not only mitigation and adaptation, but also just transition and green growth, embedding carbon neutrality into all government policies and fiscal plans. Second, to mobilize further investments and finance from the private sector, policymakers need to provide standards on what counts as green and what does not. As a first step to do so, Korea developed its own green finance taxonomy, a K taxonomy, which serves as a key reference for all green economic activities, promoting green investment and preventing greenwashing. Korea is ready to share such experience and lessons learned with the rest of the world. Finally, let me emphasize the power of solidarity as a key to our transition to a green economy. We should provide support for capacity building for those countries ready to act, but in need of practical assistance. In this spirit, Korea vowed to scale up its Green New Deal ODAs at the People's Summit last year. From this year, we are developing climate and environment-related ODA projects for climate-vulnerable countries, especially those in Asia and the Pacific, to achieve our collective ambition for a net zero green economy. Realizing the green economy is challenging enough, but we will reach this destination if we act together. Thank you.
Thank you. You've also put a finger on an issue that I'm going to want to come back to, the issue of finance and how we make this happen, where the money comes from, which I know is a question, Karin, you've been thinking quite a lot about recently, among other topics. And I'm curious, what do you believe are the key ingredients for making this green and inclusive economic transition happen in line with the SDGs? You might say, what is the secret sauce that can create the chemistry that we need, to mix my metaphors?
If we knew the secrets of that sauce, we would all be making that sauce every day. But and that was my first point from your question. But the other point would be that all countries and settings are themselves. Then every nation is unique, every setting is unique. So therefore, the mix has to be a bit different from every setting. But there are three things I would like to say, and they are very simple. And often the simple things are the most relevant answers. Good policies, lots of finances, and good partnerships. Effective policies, to start off with, has to be sort of the integrate what you were alluding to. Of course, all dimensions of sustainability, social sustainability, economic sustainability, as well as environmental climate sustainability. Never only one of those parts of the sustainability agenda. And that would in itself, or could rather, incentivize green and inclusive economic transformation. But it's not enough with good policies. It's never enough with good words and good policies. We also have to partner. We have to partner in different ways. We partner from the side of Swedish development cooperation with different kinds of partners. Small, tiny organizations in some countries, huge organizations like the UNDP. And we, of course, partner and support PAGE in your work to promote this agenda. Financing for development, as Alan pointed out, has long been a priority for SIDA. It's been a priority for us as we look upon ODA as necessary, but it will never eradicate poverty on the globe. It's necessary to build foundations in many countries and settings, but we need a lot more money. We'll need jobs to be created in the private sector, and we need other kinds of finance. And ODA can be used as a catalyst, and as a link to other finance. We have established this year an internal committee on financing for development and institution building. In this, we consider institutions, not only government institutions, but also informal institutions and other kinds of formal institutions. This committee will be working this year, and at the end of the year, we have a lot to deliver, Alan, and we'll do this work together. We also do support the INFFs in several countries. We are partnering with the UN, with the OECD, EU, and others to support these country-led processes. Because the policies, of course, has to stem from every country and cannot be produced by a development agent like ourselves or by the UN as such, but in every country. But we support the INFFs, the process as such. I would like to mention one other partnership, because we work in partnership with many civil society, private sector, investors, UN, and many other partners. One partnership that I would like to point out today is the partnership of the Swedish Investors for Sustainable Development, consisting of 17 Swedish institutional investors. And the purpose of that partnership is to find ways for them to invest in countries and areas, regions where they would otherwise not invest. And when I say invest, it's not any kind of investments. It's green, it's socially and economically sustainable, in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. That's the aim of this partnership in the Swedish Investors for Sustainable Development. So, policies, finances, and partnerships.
And partners.
Simple and complicated.
And complicated.
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you. Much I could lift out of that, Karin, but I'm going to lift out 4 words from an earlier part of what you said, and that was when you said, never only one part.
No.
It all has to work together. Gita, turning to you. We're actually on your turf. We're on UN sort of territory at the moment. It's the way it works. So I'm very eager to hear from you in your role as a UN resident coordinator. After the reform process has started, you've got a different set of conditions to work with. So from your perspective, what is the role of the UN in helping to unite the economic expertise and make this green transition happen in a country like where you're posted, Thailand?
Thanks, Alan. I'm going to speak, obviously, in the context of Thailand, where the government is committed to a transformation that is going to be green and high value and sustainable, based on a BCG model, right? It's in this context that we are leveraging the PAGE partners who are part of this, the PAGE initiative, to focus on 4 broad areas. First is formalizing the carbon markets. We've got a voluntary carbon market in Thailand right now, which is limited to 4 sectors. And obviously, the private sector is trading informally for carbon credits. The UN, led by UNIDO, UNEP, UNDP, and ILO, is working with the government to see how we can adjust carbon taxation, develop mechanisms for carbon reporting, right, so that we avoid double counting, and thirdly, understand the knock-on effects on the economy, and specifically for SMEs, given that there will be winners and losers, right? So that's the space that we are in. Similarly, we are working with the regulator, the government regulator there, to connect the private sector, the investors, and the bankers, and to prepare them for the carbon market, both the domestic carbon market and potentially, in slightly longer term, the regional trading that is likely to start. So that's one area that we are working on. And let me move on to the second point, which is equally important, and that focuses on waste assessments and figuring out sustainable financing mechanisms to manage waste, right? We've got UNEP, UN Habitat, and UNIDO that are carrying out waste assessments across 20 hotspots in the country, right? And these are pilots. And these assessments are telling us that 3/4 of the waste are going to landfills and dump sites, right? And obviously, urgency, there's an urgency to providing solutions that allow for recycling, recovery, and reuse, and simultaneously bringing in the private sector into the space, right? Because our assessments also showing that private sector, that under half of the space is managed by private sector, right? We want private sector engaged in this whole area of waste management. The third area where we are engaging is with the private sector directly, where we are trying to introduce clean technology, targeting polluting industries. And this is the work that UNIDO is leading on. We are working with the steel and the aluminum industry, and we are introducing best available technology, which, for example, regenerative furnaces, scrap processing machines, carbon-absorbing solvents, to just name a few. And these not only help reduce GHG in our pilots and reduce costs, but more importantly, they are being scaled up now by the steel and the aluminum industry. So 70% of the steel industry has adopted these technologies at their own cost, right? And similarly with the aluminum, we've got roughly under half of the aluminum industry that is picking up these technologies, right? So basically picking up the point that you made, that this is how scalability happens. If you provide the right kind of technology, and that's our role as the UN, right? So my last example, last area of intervention, which is equally important, is providing longer-term policy advice and program support for unlocking green jobs and skilling and reskilling with a specific focus on young people, knowing that they are going to be in the labor market soon, and equipping them to make best use of the opportunities that the labor market are going to be providing with the growth of the BCG kind of market, right? So, and this work is led by ILO, UNITAR, and UNDP. Right? So that's the kind of breadth that we are working across through PAGE.
That was incredibly well illustrated, and that gives us a sense of how PAGE works and how you work in the concrete country level. There's so many questions I'd love to dive deep into. I do to offer the panel, if any of you was stimulated to respond to something you heard from somebody else on an issue of finance, on the issue of, yes, Cecilia.
Well, I think the second, we talk a lot about governance, and the second thing that you mentioned, and we are all mentioning, I think, in this conference, is about finance. And at this point, we all agreed that the $100 billion was terribly outdated, that the global funds dedicated to climate change are running out of money, and they are totally undercapitalized, and that we need to solve and to really address this gap that you just mentioned before, the 2.5 trillions. We are not talking about billions, but trillions. And, well, yes, the money, it's out there, but where? Show me the money, where it is, right? Because we are not seeing the money channeled through the climate action. And I think that maybe this will be the third and last time to really think about a new architecture of the global financing, right? The global finance architecture, we need to redesign that. We have maybe an opportunity during the 2008 subprime crisis. Nothing happened. We thought we had an opportunity during the pandemic. Nothing happened again. So now maybe with this triple planetary crisis, we'll have the opportunity to really redesign the global finance architecture to really be able for our countries to meet our climate goals.
Thank you, Cecilia. I almost heard applause to that. So, but I was going to break in and say you used the word really. I find myself using the word actually and really very often these days to get us over that hump.
Action. We have to use more the word action.
We have to do this. Yes, indeed. I know we have a few participants in the audience who are eager to make their comments or pose their questions to you. Let's get their stimulation into the room as well. We have wandering microphones, and who's managing that? We have
over there.
There's one. Okay, good. I know, for example, that we have with us the Honorable Ivete Malbase, who is the Minister of Land and Environment for Mozambique, as well as the Ambassador of the local Climate Adaptive Living Facility, LOCAL. Minister Malbase, I know you'd like to speak. Would you please take the floor? I can offer you the corner here if you like. Most people are going to be speaking from their chairs, I want to warn you, but this is a minister, so.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon to all. Honorable ministers, distinguished delegates, all protocol observed. Please allow me, on behalf of the government of Mozambique, in capacity as the Minister of Land and Environment, as you were saying, I would like to express my gratitude for the invitation to participate in this event organized in the margin of Stockholm Plus 50, and to address some keynotes under this important reflection on the topic related to our responsibility, our opportunity, which calls every nation on this planet to revisiting economic and finance to accelerate action for people and the planet. Allow us to share that in the last 20 years, Mozambique has been several and more frequently affected by natural disasters due to its geographic location as a consequence of climate change. Considering the country's vulnerability, there was a need to create adaptive strategies and resilient mechanisms to tackle this phenomenon. In this context, my country, with the support of the important partners, is implementing the local climate adaptive living facility, widely known as LOCAL, with the aim to support, amongst others, the construction of resilient infrastructures with capacity to resist to natural events. It is also important to underline that despite damage effects of events such as cyclones Gombe, Idai, and Kenneth, which devastated many infrastructures in the country, particularly in the north and central provinces of Mozambique, some of the infrastructures financed by climate funds initiatives such as LOCAL and Merci are still standing. This is an outstanding example that demonstrates the importance to access the climate funds. The increasing availability of environment funds worldwide urges the beneficiary countries to improve their tracking tools and transparency mechanisms. Nevertheless, in alignment with the best management practice, the government of Mozambique, through the Ministry of Economy and Finance, built a system for management of government funds for the environment and climate change, also known as budgeting coding system, implanted under the government financial system, called SSTAF, with support from the Poverty Environment Action Project and the Public Finance Information System Development Center. The government of Mozambique believes that this system will contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals by linking government priorities to the NDCs as well as other global targets. However, the national consultation on the preparation of this Stockholm Plus 50, which took place in my country, defined 5 key messages, and amongst those, the consulted groups raised the need to develop partnership and build capacity to national and government institutions to become accredited financial institution, and part of the requirements and needs are known. Having said that, on behalf of the government of Mozambique, and in my capacity as ambassador of the local Climate Adaptive Link Facility, LOCAL, I would like to reiterate the commitment of my government to progressively contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Excellence, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, as you are aware, Mozambique is a candidate for non-permanent seat as a member of the Security Council for the period 2023-2024. As part of its strategy, Mozambique elected climate change issues as one of the main themes to be promoted during his mandate. At Security Council, Mozambique intends to share and exchange experience, aim to protect our planet from the adverse effects of climate change. In this context, we would like to thank through you to your governments for the support to Mozambique to enter in that important organ of the United Nations. I thank you all.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you. I should ask, do we have a reaction to the Minister's comments about but we just have gotten a very excellent picture of one country's commitments to these issues. Any response from our panel?
commitments and challenges. Also, Mozambique is really a country which has been struck by climate crisis, flooding, and all kinds of crises, which you are now taking on firmly, which is very impressive. So thank you for that. But yeah.
Thank you very much, Minister. Let's get a few more stimulants in from our audience members. I know that we also are have the opportunity for a question from an old colleague of mine, Mr. Oliver Greenfield. Where are you in the audience, sir? Can we get a microphone to Oliver, please? The convener of the Green Economy Coalition. I'm very curious to see what your reflections or question might be.
Hi, Alan. Thank you very much. Yeah, look, this is a really big, complicated moment, and I think that for all governments, the recovery from COVID is a challenge. What do you do? Where do you spend your money? What policies do you prioritize? And the coalition looked at this agenda with our partners in the Partners for Inclusive Green Economy, which include OECD and Page colleagues and others. There's about 157 documents written. Well, the good news is we read all of them on your behalf. And we summarized them, and we're launching them today. So if you want to look at Green Economy Coalition Structural Recovery from COVID Recovery, we read all of those documents on your behalf, and we identified the top 10. So it does come out that that's not just our wisdom, it's the collective wisdom of crowds. So I do really recommend that to you. It does point upon some key lessons. Some lessons from the financial crisis, where we spend a lot of money on stimulus, but we don't back it up with structural change. So simply, if you spend a lot of money stimulating renewables, but you keep fossil fuel subsidies in place, you're giving with one hand and you're taking away with the other. So you've got to do both. You've got to set the structural stuff in place alongside the stimulus stuff. So we identify those structural things for you. So there are some gaps in there that I want to bring attention to. There's some gaps on nature, particularly. Invest in nature, a really good thing that delivers both for nature, but it also delivers on jobs, rural jobs. It also creates economic activity and economic benefits. So we identify those things that give multiple benefits and a framework for thinking about multiple benefits. I know I've only got 1 minute, so I'm gonna go slightly off script. Mrs. Sadin, you talked about magical source. What is the magical source? I just want to point out that here we are in Sweden, and you always come top of the democratic, one of the most democratic countries of the world. You also have one of the most ambitious transition policies on all of this stuff. There's a correlation between those two things. And I suggest to you that one of the magic sources is that we need a societal mandate for this transition. We need to act much more progressively to find ways to include people in this transition if we're going to deliver this transition. And we call that social contract. So I hope that we all encourage more and more engagement with our societies, because there is another crisis, and that is the trust deficit that is accelerating. We don't have enough support for this transition to go to scale. So with that, I thank you very much, and chuck an extra bit in. Please look at that report, because we did all the hard work for you, and you can take those 10 policies and enact them. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. You know, I've never known you to go off script before. And those of us laughing in the room know that Oliver is always, we can rely on him to say what needs to be said. So thank you for that. A few themes are emerging that I'm keen to hear from our panelists now. Both the pragmatics of how we make government and finance work together to address a truly accelerated transition. And then, of course, a bit more of a dig into the UN's role in that through the Page Partnership. I know, Byung, you have also got some thoughts about Page's potential role, or the role that it plays. And when I was listening to you, describing the green initiatives that you have with your ODA, I thought sustainable ODA is a phrase I haven't heard yet. Maybe you could grab that one. But tell us about your thoughts about Page.
Okay. Thank you, moderator. Listening to today's distinguished speakers, my takeaway is that there is no one-size-fits-all approach in our journey toward a green economy. Different national capabilities and circumstances should be fully taken into consideration in pursuing green transition. PAGE partner countries are also at varying levels of development. And this is actually what PAGE is specialized in. UNEP, ILO, UNDP, UNIDO, and UNITA support partner countries' policymaking through resident coordinators and leverage collective strengths in providing tailored support for their sustainable growth. PAGE may have started out as a small initiative in 2013, but now this strength of PAGE model is so powerful that the UN Development Coordination Office reached out, hoping to replicate this model across the whole UN system. Dear colleagues, Korea will stand as a reliable partner for these countries in transition, especially those in Asia-Pacific region, with PAGE projects and Korea's Green New Deal ODA. We are both proud and pleased to be part of the PAGE from its initiation and would like to continue our funding contribution to support PAGE 2030 strategies. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to want to return to this question of the role of ODA. But first, let me just see if this is pretty much your last chance. I'm going to scan the audience and see if there's anybody with a burning question or comment they'd like to make. And you need to show your hand very clearly if you want to speak. Do we have? Yes, please, in the back.
Yes, hello.
And please identify yourself, sir.
Yes, my name is Stig-Olof Holm. I'm working as a lecturer in Umeå University in Northern Sweden in the College of Environmental Science. And I have to question this issue about circular economy, because if we continue the growth, sooner or later the recycling wouldn't be enough. Then the growth will continue to increase the consumption. And it's named Jevons paradox. It's long ago known by economists. So we have to deal with the growth. I will say we have nothing less sustainable growth in a finite Earth. It's impossible.
Thank you. And those of you, yes, it's an interesting question. Those of you who didn't hear the Jevons paradox, we're talking about the fact that the more efficient we get, we learn how to save energy, we use that energy in new ways. And we don't actually stop the process of expansion of our resource consumption. That's the Jevons paradox. And it would be interesting to know whether anybody here on our panel has the solution to the Jevons paradox. That is to say, how can we stimulate a transition to a green economy, which I also believe means we'll see rising GDP levels when we do that transition. There's a lot of economic activity involved. But how do we do that without continuing to be on that squirrel wheel, we call it in Swedish, that will continue to run down the planet's resources? Anybody have a clue?
I don't have a clue, but I do have an occasion where we all should have thought it through a lot more, and that is next year's Summit for the Future. The Secretary General is calling upon all of us to actually think exactly around that until September next year, when we are discussing our common agenda, and one of the points is what he calls the GDP plus, which is something else. So it's very much in line with this. I don't have an answer. But he is also working hard on it, or making others work hard on it under his guidance.
Good. Thanks, Karen. And I think we'll move into a wrap-up of the panel. So I'm going to give you the word back again, because I'm keen to hear a little bit more of your thoughts about the role of ODA in all of this. Our colleague from Korea has just spoken quite a lot about that, and we also think a lot about that.
We also think a lot about that, but I would like to say two things. I'm very glad to hear you, because I think it's in 2 weeks, I will have a meeting with the head of KOICA and discussing a cooperation between SIDA and KOICA. And I will certainly take this up, the Green New Deal and sustainable ODA. I'm looking forward to having a ODA development aid cooperation with Korea and continue to develop this. So thank you for taking this up. And when it comes to the Sustainable Development Goals, they are 17, and they are social, they are green, they are blue, they are all kinds of colors. And the trick is, of course, for all of us to continue focus on all of them. But remember that all of the green goals have a social dimension, and the opposite is also true. I think that working on the Sustainable Development Goals with ODA, we have to remember that, and we'll always budget or plan for all of the dimensions. That is my simple answer. I don't have any more time, I think.
Thank you for that. I'm going to be giving the word to both Gita and Cecilia for final comments as well, since the two of you have just summarized your points so beautifully. But I have gotten word that we have one more speaker in the audience, a minister who would like to make a few remarks. Yes, please identify. Minister from...
Good afternoon. Muawiyah Radadi, I'm the Minister of Environment from Jordan.
Jordan. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Well, I know we're towards the end, so I'm not going to take a lot of time, but you run out of things to say after a wonderful discussion that we've heard from the panel. But time does fly, and 50 years have passed. And we've known about this problem, climate change, and the challenges that it presents for a while. And one thing that we suffer from is crisis amnesia. We do go through a lot of problems, and in the case of climate change, the lady earlier was talking about the types of losses that they witness in her country, and we do keep on going through that cycle again and again. And I'm afraid that if we don't learn from the lessons of the past, we're going to continue to struggle and continue to talk about adaptation and mitigation and loss and damage. So let's not meet again in, well, maybe the next generation meet again in 50 years, and we're still talking about the same things. And we still talk about finance. And we still talk about $100 billion that we don't know how to track. So the next COP is about implementation, and it's time for action. And in Jordan, for example, there are certain requirements that every country has to go through, NDCs and Green Growth Action Plans, and you put these things in place, and then it's time for implementation. And the struggle is how to get to the implementation stage through knowledge sharing and through finance. So those are two items that are necessary to get to it. I know somebody mentioned here that the money is there, but it's great. But let's put that money into action. And the last two things is youth.
Okay.
I mean, these are the ones that will be meeting in 50 years, and we'll be looking back at this pivotal moment that we are in right now. And let's hope that they're not going to look back and say, well, they did not set us up well, and we're still going through the same problems that they have caused, and we are making up for lost time. And then, again, half of the population. Activation of women into climate action. And you cannot do that without half of the population. And what we have now is an opportunity of a clean canvas. There are many opportunities that climate change and the challenges that it presents provide us. One of them, for example, is climate-smart agriculture.
Yes.
So it's an opportunity to engage women in many parts of the world in this kind of work, so that in 20 years we don't look back and say, well, we should have engaged women in these types of actions. So there's a silver lining as well that we should capitalize on.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Let's make sure that when the next group meets in 50 years, they're meeting to celebrate and not to commiserate. We've had wonderful reflective thoughts from Yobyong and Karin, so I think I'd like to give the floor to Cecilia and Gita for very short, less than 1 minute, final reflections.
That's difficult. Well, very, very short. Just taking what you just mentioned, I think we have to talk about the role of women, of course, and that brings me to the idea that, and the hope that the next COP in Egypt that will be about means of implementation, we can really, really take the adaptation agenda to the next level that it needs to take, mostly because the people that are suffering the most are the more vulnerable, and in our countries and in our region in the global south are women specifically. So I think that we need to work on that agenda seriously. And just the other one, the 30 seconds, it's about when we think about means of implementation, we need to talk about building local capacity, and that means transfer of technology, but just in a void way of transfer of technology, but really talking about patents and opening all that technology for countries to develop their own local capacities. And that is something that we've been struggling a lot during the pandemic whenever we talk about vaccines. I'm sorry I bring this, but I've been negotiating the vaccines for my country. So I really face the difficulties whenever we wanted to produce, to be able to distribute better the vaccines in our region. And that was one of the main problems. And it was ridiculous that that unequal distribution of vaccine was costing so many lives worldwide. So if we weren't able to put a common path for addressing that dramatic problem, we really need to rethink how we will do this towards climate change.
Thank you very much. Gita, final word to you. How do we make sure that we're not meeting in 50 years to commiserate?
Futures workshop next year. But Alan, I want to use my last minute to say three things very quickly. And more about PAGE, right? Because that's where I come from as a UN resident coordinator. Firstly, what joint programs like PAGE and others have done, they have incentivized the country team, the UN country team, to coordinate, leverage, and adopt an integrated approach to policy advice and technical expertise that we bring to bear. And the examples that I showcased talk to that. Right? That's the first thing. Secondly, what they have done is they have brought us together, coordinate for program implementation. What I want to see more of is front loading of this coordination to program design and co-creation. Right? And my final my final comment on this is that this coming together of the country team is also incentivizing the government to adopt a whole of government approach. Right? Because, and that is the real win here in many ways. Based on PAGE, we are also looking at a national pool funding mechanism at the country level for SDGs, capitalized by government and private sector together with the UN. And this dialogue has started because of joint programs like PAGE. Right? And we are taking this discussion forward. The UN Deputy Secretary General, when she was in Thailand last month, she helped us kickstart this dialogue with the Prime Minister and private sector. So this is what joint programming can enable the UN family to take forward.
Thank you so much. You know, that's, yes. Whole of government approach, never only one part, bringing these two parts together. Let us thank this wonderful panel for stimulating us to hope and action. Thank you so much. So enjoyable. Now we switch gears because we've been talking about PAGE. We've been explaining what PAGE is, how it works, but now we are coming to a moment where we welcome growth of the sustainable kind in the PAGE family. And I'd like to invite up onto the stage to help me and others welcome these new family members. A very distinguished guest and old friend, Mr. Nikhil Seth, who's the Assistant Secretary General of the UN and working as Executive Director of the UN Institute for Training and Research, UNITAR, as it's called, one of the key partners in PAGE. And I believe PAGE's idea here, Nikhil, was that we were going to welcome our colleagues first. You'll have some closing remarks to make in a minute, but what we're doing first is welcoming new PAGE family members. Before we do that, I want to just make sure they know a little bit about who you are, because you also worked at UNDESA, and in that role you served as the head of the Rio +20 Secretariat. And basically made sure that it happened, as I recall, and as well as the International Conference on Small and Developing States, and you've kept an interest in those things. I think anything that has a plus after it these days now, Nikhil is involved in. But if I remember right from Assad, we need to now call up to the stage all the UN agencies. All PAGE UN agencies, representatives of each, please come up onto the stage. We're improvising in real time. Yeah. Stephen, we need ILO, we need UNIDO, we have, yeah, good. All right. Good. And now this group is going to welcome 2 new members of the Page family, Cambodia and Rwanda. So we have Mr. Pak Sokarov. Are you here? Yes. Acting Director General of Environmental Protection for Cambodia. Please, could you maybe loan him your microphone, Nikhil? Could you just tell us a little bit about what it means to Cambodia to be joining Page?
Good morning, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. We are very appreciated to be the new partner of the Page, and we will learn, and we have reaffirmed that we will work closely, cooperate with all partners and also UN agency in order to successful in the Page for the green economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and welcome to the Page family. And now we have the Honorable Dr. Jean-Darc Mujawar-Maria. Is that Jean? Welcome, madam. And please tell us from the Rwanda perspective, what does it mean to you to be joining the Page initiative?
Thank you very much. As the newest member of Page, we very much joining Page because we are going to take our green economy agenda to the highest level. And we are ready to share with other people, other Page members. And of course, we know that you cannot talk about development without talking about green and environment. Thank you.
Thank you. What I'd like to propose that we do now is, as a group, and this is also a photo opportunity for those of you who might have a phone in your pocket, to just give a really warm round of applause to these 2 new members of the Page family. Who are going to help ensure that when it's Stockholm Plus 100, we're all here to celebrate the transition to a green and inclusive economy. So thank you all very much. And now we're going to leave the stage to our colleague Nikhil Seth. And Nikhil, we leave it to you to give us some final words of reflection and to close our session. Please.
Thank you, Alan. Concluding statements are really an opportunity to say thank you. And I would like to start by thanking Alan for the very animated way he moderated the last discussion, and to congratulate all those who participated. It's also a time to say thank you to Cambodia and Rwanda for becoming the latest partners of Page. I also wanted to thank the funding partners who are here in strength, as also the partners who make up for Page and the countries who are already partners in Page. So thank you to all of you for making Page what it is today. Instead of giving a substantive summary, I thought I would, and I'm often reminded of this when people are somewhat critical of what we do in the UN, and they come to us and, for example, say that what's the point of having big meetings? What do big meetings ever lead to? And I was there in 2012 when Page was born after the Rio +20 conference. And I must say, if that is a little evidence of how success comes from these big conferences, here it is. We are 10 years later with a very wonderful partnership, with sustainable funding, with very happy partners, both from those who benefit from our partnership and those who help us implement this partnership. The second criticism we hear sometimes is that it's very difficult to coordinate this herd of cats in the United Nations. Everyone is running in a separate direction. But here is a concrete example of how successfully over the last 10 years, 5 different UN entities have cooperated so fully and robustly. And I have not heard one criticism within the family of the kind of coordination work we have done together. The third is, of course, how difficult it is in the UN to sustain partnerships. Sustaining partnerships and the nurturing it requires is a difficult proposition. You need regular funding and sustaining of that funding. But here is another example where a partnership forged in Rio +20 is sustaining it. It has opportunities to be nurtured the way it is today by these wonderful events, which keeps these partnerships alive and robust. So these are three clear examples I'm giving you of where we've gone with this partnership. And as to where we want to go in the future, we've heard from one resident coordinator of how successful the work of this partnership has been in Thailand. And to take it to further scale, I think our effort in PAGE is going to be to try and bring it to all the remaining 127 countries where there are resident coordinators. Depending on what their appetite is, depending on what the focus of that country is, we realize that it has to be country-specific and tailored to the needs of these countries. So on behalf of all of you PAGE partners, I'm making this pledge now to try and reach all the developing countries so that we can benefit all of them. So I think that's going to be very important. And what I heard from you, I think is very important, that there has to be a flexibility in the way we define the templates we are going to help countries in. We've seen our contemporaneous world is very, every 6 months there is a new crisis, and it's PAGE's ability to be flexible, to bring to governments not a magical template they worked with 10 years ago, but to try and be as flexible, adaptable, and useful to the countries. That is going to be the mark of success for PAGE in the future. So I thank you all once again for being here as you plan your next move to the next room in this wonderful building, and to thank all the PAGE partners, especially to Asad and the others who've done so much hard work in making this event possible. So thank you and have a lovely afternoon.